Hello, everyone, and welcome to our deep dive into the NetSuite 2026.1 release. I'm Scott Robertson, Vice President of Strategy and Optimization at 79 Consulting, and I'll be moderating today's session. Every NetSuite release introduces new features, but occasionally the release feels a little bit less about what's new and more about how the platform itself is evolving. It's becoming cleaner, smarter, more aligned with how organizations actually operate. So to me, 2026.1 feels like one of those releases. Across finance, operations, and planning, we're seeing thoughtful refinements that reduce friction, improve visibility, and strengthen confidence in the data that teams rely on every day. So rather than walking line by line through the release notes, we're going to focus on what really matters, where risk is reduced, where workflows become more flexible, and where organizations can move from reacting to issues towards anticipating them. So to help unpack all of that, I'm joined by two people who spend their day in the details of how NetSuite actually works in real organizations. First, we have Vincent Lee, who is our Senior NetSuite Financial Architect. Vince works closely with organizations, designing financial systems at scale, with a strong focus on automation and reporting integrity and long-term stability. He'll help connect today's updates to a bigger architectural trends that we're seeing. Vince, great to have you with us.
Scott, thank you. I'm happy to be here today.
And also joining us is Naveena Boppana, Functional Practice Lead at 79 Consulting. Naveena works closely with finance and operations teams, translating real-world requirements into practical NetSuite solutions. So she'll help us ground these updates in what they actually mean for day-to-day workflows. Naveena, welcome, and really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Scott, for the warm welcome.
Sure thing. So before we jump in, feel free to drop questions or comments into the chat as we go along. We'll address them where it makes sense during the session, and we'll also leave time at the end for an open Q&A. And of course, we'll share our contact information afterwards if you'd like to continue the conversation. So to make this a little bit of interactive from the start, you should see a quick poll on your screen. And we're asking, have you already tested the NetSuite 2026.1 release preview, or are you planning to? So go ahead and select the option that best fits where you are today. And this just kind of helps us understand where everybody is in their upgrade journey. And if you're thinking, we know we should test, we just haven't gotten there yet, you're definitely not alone. We'll talk later about how to approach that without it feeling overwhelming. All right, looks like the results are coming in, and it's a great mix there. So that helps us kind of get helpful context as we move along. So let's get started. Let's start first with accounting, because many of the most meaningful improvements in this release begin at that foundation. One thing that we consistently see is that automation only works as well as the data that's behind it. So if the structure isn't solid, then the automation eventually creates risk instead of value. So Naveena, from an accounting perspective, what stood out to you in this release?
So one of the biggest improvements is actually quite subtle, but incredibly important for organizations relying on integrations or automation. So the journal line sublists are now standardized with unique identifiers. So previously updates depended on the line order. That meant if a journal changed, like lines were inserted or rearranged, updates could affect the wrong entry. But now each journal line has a unique key. So this ensures integrations update exactly what they're intended to update.
I see. Yeah, I mean, that's not a super flashy release. That's not a super flashy feature, but that does remove a layer of risk when you're doing those integrations, and especially for organizations that are kind of scaling integration and automation where they have a lot of those inputs. So, Vince, from your perspective, is that what you're seeing with this release?
Absolutely. And we see similar thinking applied to custom GL lines for secondary accounting books. Organizations managing multiple reporting frameworks like IFRS, US GAAP, or local statutory reporting can now maintain consistent custom logic without duplication. It simplifies complexity while improving compliance visibility.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's really about, precision without adding to the complexity, I think. Another friction point that we often hear about is during the close cycle, and I know you have a lot of experience there, especially when timelines shift. So first of all, Naveena, can you walk us through kind of what changed there?
Yes. So there is one thing about posting period enhancement, right? So if a journal entry was pending approval, the posting period could not be changed. So teams had to reject and restart the workflows. But now posting periods can be adjusted while the approval workflows remain intact. So that flexibility removes unnecessary delays without any compromising control.
Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I mean, that's a really practical improvement. Instead of restarting approvals, teams gain the flexibility without sacrificing control. And Vince, revenue management also saw some refinements in this release, I believe. What stands out to you there?
I think revenue management follows the same philosophy. Treatment rules now support additional business dimensions like departments, classes, locations, custom segments. This allows revenue recognition to reflect real organizational structures rather than forcing teams into rigid configurations. Fewer rules, clearer logic, and easier scalability.
I gotcha. So, I mean, I think we're seeing already, and even just these few features we've talked about, that we're not talking about reinvention here, right? We're talking about refinements. And, stronger data integrity, more flexibility during the close, like you just highlighted, revenue automation that better reflects how organizations are actually structured. So for finance teams, that ultimately means fewer workarounds, I'm assuming, and more confidence in the system itself. So let's shift into kind of another area where visibility plays a critical role, and that's in the banking and cash flow management. So cash visibility is one of those areas where organizations often operate reactively rather than proactively. So Vince, when you look at 2026.1, what shifts stand out to you in this area?
I feel NetSuite is clearly moving toward forward-looking finance. One example that kind of proves this is the improved control over bank transaction imports. Organizations can now define an earliest transaction date. This prevents historical data from flooding reconciliation workflows during the onboarding process. It provides cleaner inputs, reduced operational noise. In fact, Naveena, in addition, I think you can throw some light on some cash forecast enhancements as well.
Yeah, definitely. So this cash forecasting now includes billing schedules, right? So instead of relying only on open invoices, forecasts incorporate expected billing timelines aligned with contracts. So for subscription or milestone based businesses, so this significantly improves the forecast accuracy as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that, Naveena, because I think that improvement for those subscription and milestone-driven businesses is a really, big jump forward. So forecasting, becomes less about guesswork and more about visibility tied to real contractual timelines. And now, Vince, we're also beginning to see AI enter the daily workflows here. Can you expand on that?
Sure. In the form of payment date prediction, NetSuite now uses machine learning to estimate expected payment dates based on historical behavior. These predictions aren't definitive, but they do provide an additional layer of insight for planning and prioritization. Fewer spreadsheet predictions and fewer best guesses based on a gut feeling.
Right, right. What I find interesting across all these updates is the shift from kind of tracking what's already happened to, what you might call anticipating what's likely to happen. So instead of relying on, like you said, spreadsheets and instinct, teams kind of get system-driven signals to guide their planning. Naveena, would you say that's a fair takeaway?
Exactly, Scott. For example, better control over incoming bank data obviously reduces operational noise, right? So while enhanced forecasting and payment predictions help teams anticipate outcomes instead of simply responding to them. So these changes may seem incremental individually, but together they move organizations closer to forward-looking financial management.
Yeah, right. So cleaner bank inputs, smarter forecasting, and early predictive signals, that's really about helping those finance teams look forward, not just backwards. And that naturally brings us into another area, I think, where visibility and control become even more critical, and that's in intercompany controls. So, if you have multi-subsidiary environments, they bring a different kind of complexity, right? As organizations grow across entities, or to maintain transparency and control becomes more challenging. So, Vince, what improvements have sent out to you in this release?
Well, there's a lot. There's not a lot of, but the latest update can't be dismissed as nothing. We can't overlook it. So after the latest update, NetSuite users can now unlink those intercompany cross-charge journals, and they can do so directly, completely eliminating dependency on support interventions. And that's not all. When it comes to Suite Analytics, new intercompany elimination dataset improves visibility. See, multi-entity environments often introduce hidden complexities, and what we're seeing here is NetSuite simply controlling without sacrificing governance. The ability to manage intercompany relationships more directly, combined with improved reporting visibility, this is going to help finance teams move faster while maintaining clarity across those subsidiaries. I think NetSuite is moving towards as much hands-free intercompany transactional management as they can get right now.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a key theme here, which is simplifying your control without sacrificing that oversight. So while these sections may not be headline grabbing again, more kind of incremental, it is another example of NetSuite quietly strengthening, I think, the clarity in these complex environments especially. So, let's kind of widen the lens a bit beyond accounting. So 2026.1 also introduces meaningful updates in inventory and supply chain, kind of the operational side of NetSuite. So in relation to inventory and supply chain, what stands out to me in 2026.1 is that these updates don't try to reinvent operations, but they do acknowledge that operations are rarely perfect. Teams deal with vendor-owned stock, partial picks, fluctuating availability, and planning uncertainty every day. And this release feels like NetSuite's trying to address those kind of, random and unclean events and make the system a little bit more acceptable to work when these things actually happen. So let's start with consigned inventory. Naveena, from a functional perspective, what changes here for organizations that do have to manage vendor-owned inventory?
Sure. One of the biggest challenges with consigned inventory has always been visibility without ownership. So organizations need to track inventory physically inside their warehouses, but financially, they don't own it yet, right? So in earlier setups, teams often relied on workarounds to manage this distinction. But with NetSuite 2026.1, we now have a dedicated framework that introduces clear inventory statuses specifically for consigned stock. So what's powerful is that consigned and owned inventory can exist within the same operational flows like purchasing, receiving, adjustments, fulfillment without requiring any separate processes.
So instead of creating kind of parallel workflows or workarounds, the system is able to adapt to that ownership model.
Exactly. Ownership transfers automatically only when items are sold or consumed. So which ensures this financial accuracy while keeping operations seamless.
That makes a ton of sense. I know that we're talking about these things as kind of smallish or incremental changes, but I imagine if a company is somebody that manages vendor-owned inventory, this is a huge upgrade to NetSuite. So Vince, from an architectural standpoint, this, I'm guessing, also impacts financial alignment as well, correct?
Yes, and that's where this enhancement becomes really strategic. Organizations can define dedicated accounts for consigned assets and optional consigned COGS. Vendor billing is tied to actual consumption rather than receipt. That alignment reduces reconciliation challenges between finance and operations, which is often where complexities arise.
Yeah, and once ownership visibility improves, then I guess the next question becomes availability, especially for more complex product structures like kits, right?
That's right. Previously, teams often estimated kit availability based on assumptions. Now, NetSuite evaluates the availability of underlying components automatically. When a required kit quantity is entered, the system calculates realistic fulfillment dates based on actual inventory conditions across locations. This improves coordination between planning, fulfillment, and customer-facing teams.
And that has ripple effects as well. Accurate availability influences not just operations, but also customer expectations and financial planning. So when promised dates are realistic, downstream processes become more predictable as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know that traditionally companies have just had to estimate kit availability. So now with this new release, they can get realistic fulfillment dates based on what the actual components that are in inventory. Yeah, that's big actually. And Naveena, I know warehouse execution also saw some practical improvements here. What stood out there to you?
Warehouses rarely operate under perfect conditions, right? NetSuite, but now allows teams to close pick tasks even when zero quantity is picked. So that might sound small, but it removes operational clutter. No more unnecessary open tasks when items are unavailable. So teams also gain flexibility when dealing with back orders, right? So work orders can now proceed even if some components are back ordered, instead of being completely blocked.
Yeah, I mean, having worked with warehouses for a long time, this seems like a big one because warehouses rarely operate under ideal conditions.
Yeah, and administrators still retain control through these configurable rules.
Yeah, I appreciate how practical these updates are, especially on the warehousing and inventory side. I'm thinking about closing picked tasks when nothing is picked. May sound small, but it removes operational clutter, and it also allows work orders to proceed despite those partial back orders that reflect how warehouse teams, usually have to operate. Now, so let's zoom out just a little bit and move upstream into that supply chain planning, where many of the execution challenges actually originate. So Vince, what's new on the planning side?
Well, NetSuite has introduced new planning workbooks built on the planning results pegging dataset. These provide clearer visibility into supply and demand relationships across purchasing, production, sales. Instead of navigating fragmented reports, teams can access structured insights aligned with their role. And that clarity improves collaboration. When procurement, production, and sales teams work from consistent data, planning conversations become more aligned and efficient. There are also important stability improvements. For example, standard purchase order forms are now consistently used during planning generation, and supply fields populate automatically when items are duplicated, thus reducing any configuration errors.
Okay, so yeah, there is actually quite a bit here in this release, I think. And to summarize, what I think I heard in this inventory and operational side is you have better ownership tracking, especially if you have vendor-owned or consigned inventory. You have more reliable, available insights, especially with things like kits. You have more flexible execution in the warehouse, especially if your inventory levels aren't exactly what you expected when you go to make a pick. And then, of course, the clear planning upstream for your supply planning. So those aren't only practical, they do better reflect how supply chains actually operate. Now, along with these features, we would be remiss if we didn't highlight some of the technical updates that are kind of working behind the scenes that make these improvements possible. So there's some important platform level changes, I'll call them, sort of happening under the covers. And these aren't always visible to the everyday user, but they are critical updates for administrators and developers. Vince, from a technical standpoint, what is there to highlight in this 2026.1 release?
Well, one of the most important updates, especially for teams using analytics integrations, is the retirement of the older NetSuite.com data source. With NetSuite 2026.1, the NetSuite 2.com data source becomes the only supported option for Suite Analytics Connect. Any queries requiring the legacy NetSuite.com source will no longer function after the upgrade. While this may sound like a back-end change, it actually represents a broader move towards standardization and improved performance within NetSuite's analytics ecosystem.
Yeah, it does sound like a strategic change, but it's also the exact kind of change that can surprise teams if they're only focused on these front-end changes that we're talking about. When data sources shift, all of a sudden reporting and integrations can just stop working. So it's definitely something to pay attention to, especially for administrators. Naveena, from an implementation perspective, what should organizations keep in mind?
Sure. Organizations should review existing integrations in their NetSuite instances, reporting pipelines, or any external BI tools that may still rely on the legacy data source. So migrating to NetSuite 2.com, it ensures continuity, and teams can definitely benefit from NetSuite's evolving analytics framework. So it's less about rebuilding and more about modernizing the existing connections.
Yeah, I see that. That is not, like you said, not really rebuilding. It's just more about making sure that you are now connecting to these more modern connections. And Vince, we're also seeing continued movement away from legacy integration models. Can you speak to that direction?
Sure. Yes, NetSuite continues moving away from SOAP web services towards more modern integration models. The 2025.2 SOAP endpoint was the last planned standard release, signaling a gradual shift toward new API frameworks designed for scalability and flexibility. For technical teams, this isn't an immediate disruption, but it's a clear direction of travel. Future integrations should increasingly align with modern API approaches rather than those legacy protocols. Naveena, could you remind us what some of those modern replacements are?
Definitely, Vince. New integrations must now use this OAuth 2.0 for REST web services, RESTlets, and Suite Analytics Connect. This aligns NetSuite with modern security practices and reduces reliance on older authentication mechanisms, which is great for security, but also means teams planning new integrations should factor this into their architecture decisions early.
Yeah, I think that is an important point, Naveena, is that these specific technical things we're talking about are worth looking into early and planning for, your migration integration. So stepping back, I guess, as we've kind of wrap up this section, the theme here that I'm hearing is consistent with the rest of the release, which is it's not a dramatic overhaul. These things have been announced for quite some time and have been anticipated for quite some time. But NetSuite is pushing hard to kind of get all of us to move towards a more modern, standard, and what I would call future-ready platform, especially as we look ahead to AI, which is a perfect segue into our next section, which I think everyone is anticipating is what's coming out with AI, because NetSuite's been talking about this for a long time. But before we do that, let's kind of get a quick pulse from the audience. Let's put another poll up here on the screen to kind of see what you have. So which of these updates that we've talked about so far do you think will have the biggest impact on your organization? So go ahead and select the option there that you think is the one that impacts you the most. We're just curious to see where your priorities differ across the different teams. Okay, great. All right, we're seeing those results come in. It's always interesting to see what different teams feel about their biggest impacts. All right, so let's move on to this area that I think many of us are curious about, and that's AI. It's probably the feature that we hear the most about. That's what NetSuite talked a lot about at Suite World this past year, and we're all watching very closely. So let's talk about how NetSuite is actually approaching it. Vince, so in this release, what stands out to you about how AI is being introduced right now?
Sure, and I really appreciate what they're doing here. So, what's important about NetSuite's approach here is that AI isn't positioned as a dramatic overhaul. Instead, it's being introduced quietly, being embedded into workflows where it can provide meaningful assistance without disrupting how teams already work. A good example of this is the new Close Manager dashboard. Instead of introducing complexity, the Close Manager dashboard focuses on one of the most critical and often stressful processes for the finance teams, that dreaded period close. Traditionally, closing has been reactive. Teams move through their checklists, they resolve issues as they appear, and only toward the end do risks becomes fully visible. The Close Manager shifts that dynamic by bringing everyone into a single centralized view.
I appreciate how you highlighted that this isn't sort of a dramatic overhaul per se, but it feels even more embedded than they had even hinted at. Naveena, what does that look like in practice?
So, from a functional perspective, Scott, what this dashboard does is consolidate multiple signals into one place. So, it combines transaction activity, outstanding close related tasks, key KPIs like variances and net income, and AI driven exception detection also. So, instead of searching across different reports or dashboards, now teams can see what has already happened, what is still pending, and what might be missing.
Okay, yeah, those are some, I think, really nice areas for AI to start playing a role. And I'm also just thinking about, how teams, used to have to wait till the end of close to discover gaps. And so now it sounds like they're getting earlier signals. Vince, is that kind of how this predictive elements work?
Exactly. The system analyzes their historical patterns and highlights expected activity that hasn't yet occurred. For example, transactions that normally appear during a close period but are currently missing. That early signal allows teams to investigate proactively instead of discovering issues at the very last minute.
Yeah.
And this is also where the simplicity becomes important, right? So once the close manager feature is enabled, there is no heavy configuration required. So tasks are generated automatically based on system activity and enabled features. The portlet appears directly on the home dashboard, right? So users don't need to learn a new process. It simply enhances how they already work.
And I think that's going to be important for the AI rollout that NetSuite does, is that it doesn't feel like you have to relearn the entire application. I think it enhances workflows that users already rely on. Vince, is that kind of your take as well?
Yes, and teams can filter the dashboard by period or subsidiary, monitor their KPIs in real time, and drill into specific exceptions. That balance between automation and control is important. AI surfaces insights, but teams remain in charge of decisions. And for organizations managing complex closes, multiple entities, multiple teams, this visibility reduces last-minute surprises. Instead of firefighting at the end, teams gain a more guided and structured closing experience.
Yeah, and I think that balance between automation and control is really the key for people to feel comfortable with it. The system kind of surfaces those insights, but teams maintain control. They're just not turning it over to the computer to run with it.
Exactly. The close manager represents an early but meaningful step towards AI assisted finance, where systems help guide processes without removing human judgment. So, no, AI is not taking over your close process, it's just helping you sleep better during your month end.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, so while we're talking about AI, especially the in this upcoming release, we're seeing kind of a consistent pattern, right? Like you said, AI isn't being introduced as kind of this flashy add-on or taking over control of everything. It's really being embedded into everyday workflows to remove friction and surface the insides at just the right moment. So I think it might be a good chance for us to take a few minutes and kind of show a practical example of how that same AI-assisted approach can be applied within your entire NetSuite ecosystem. So Naveena, can you walk us through how we here at 79 Consulting and Varna are incorporating AI into our NetSuite suite apps, such as SkyDoc?
Absolutely. So traditionally, document handling or classification inside the ERP environments has involved a lot of manual effort, like sorting files, entering data, searching for records, and ensuring documents are attached to the right transactions or not. Let's face it, right? So it is very tedious. What we are building with SkyDoc now is an intelligent document lifecycle powered by AI, moving from manual handling towards assisted workflows. So the process now begins with simple drag and drop uploads like PDFs, images, or any scanned documents. So from there, AI automatically identifies the document type and extracts key information like names, amounts, dates, or any identifiers.
Okay, so instead of users having to like classify or categorize documents themselves or maybe stuff a bunch of keywords in the title of the document, the system actually just understands the context of that document.
Exactly. So after classification, SkyDoc performs intelligent matching by querying NetSuite directly to identify the correct vendor, customer, employee, or transaction. So once verified, the document is automatically attached to the appropriate record and stored securely in the cloud storage. So what used to involve multiple manual steps now becomes a guided flow. So you just have to upload, AI classifies the data, does the smart matching, and then attachment would be automatically updated.
Gotcha. So what I like here, other than the obvious benefit of having much clearer idea of what the document is about and searching and finding, I also like how it reduces a lot of these small repetitive steps. You don't have to do all these little things yourself, upload, classify, match, attach. These steps usually require a lot of manual attention, and now they're becoming guided and automated. So Vince, from a technical standpoint, what makes this approach meaningful from your perspective?
So two things stand out. First, the use of AI vision models to extract structured data from documents. That dramatically reduces manual data entry and the risk of errors. Second would be the integration layer. SkyDoc uses intelligent queries directly against NetSuite data, which means the matching becomes faster and more accurate compared to manual searches. Security is also built into the design. API credentials are managed through NetSuite's secrets management rather than hard-coded, which is critical for enterprise environments.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a critical point that you bring up, Vince, especially about the importance of having these apps inside of NetSuite, is that this matching is happening directly against your NetSuite data. So accuracy improves, manual searching decreases, and I know there's another enhancement here that addresses something everyone has experienced, and that's kind of opening multiple files just to figure out which one you actually need. So Naveena, can you walk us through that?
Sure. And I think most teams will immediately relate to this also. So today, even when documents are stored properly in SkyDoc, users still need to open or download files individually just to understand what's inside. And that creates small but constant interruptions to the workflow. So we are introducing AI summary, a new capability that gives users instant context without leaving NetSuite. So when a user opens a file in a split preview, they'll see an AI summary button. So with just one click, the system analyzes the document and generates a concise, readable summary directly within the preview panel itself. So no downloads are needed, no switching tabs, no detective work also.
Yeah, and also no opening a document being like, wait, is this the right document?
Exactly. And from an operational perspective, it's designed to be simple. Admins enable AI features from the SkyDoc setup page, configure the AI engine once, and the summary capability becomes available across all split previews. Once a summary is generated, it's also cached locally. So when another team member opens the same file later, the summary loads instantly without triggering another AI request.
I mean, that is such a smart use of AI's capabilities. I love it. Vince, anything you'd like to add from kind of a technical perspective on this?
So what stands out is how seamlessly this fits into existing workflows. The summary appears directly inside NetSuite, so users don't have to move between tools or interrupt their processes. And every summary includes a quick copy option, making it easy to paste them into emails, notes, support tickets, or other NetSuite records. There's also graceful error handling if the AI engine isn't available. Users receive a clear message with retry guidance instead of confusion.
Thank you. And thank you both for walking through that. I think it really does highlight, it's a great example of a broader theme, which is AI doesn't need to be this dramatic to be very valuable. Sometimes it's about removing these tiny friction points that add up to very thoughtful and clear improvements throughout your day. So in this example, right, there's less searching, there's less switching, and ultimately there's more clarity inside the tools that the teams are already using. So let's pause here then to give you a chance to ask questions. We've covered a lot today, and we've gone through a lot of things from accounting to operations to AI, even to some technical background things. So what questions do you have? Feel free to drop those into the chat, and we'll address as many as we can. Okay, thank you. So again, we covered a lot today, from stronger accounting foundations to improved cash visibility to more adaptable supply chain workflows, and now early AI-assisted insights. And as we said at the beginning, it seems that this release isn't about dramatic change as much as it's about a thoughtful refinement. And what we really feel is that they're creating this foundation for many AI and new features that are yet to come. So Naveena, let me ask you, if you had to describe this NetSuite 2026.1 release in one word, what would it be?
That's a great question, Scott. So for me, the word would be alignment, because across accounting, operations, and planning, we are seeing workflows align more closely with the real business needs, right? So teams don't have to force their processes to fit the system as much. The system adapts to how they actually operate. So alignment.
Okay, alignment. I like that. Vince, what about you?
I would say proactive, especially with improvements in forecasting, planning, and visibility, and AI-driven insights. NetSuite is helping organizations move from reacting to events toward anticipating what's coming next and assisting teams to plan way better than they used to.
Okay, alignment and proactive. I like both of those. It's good.
What about you, Scott? How would you describe it?
You're not going to let me off the hook. Okay, I would say, maybe confidence. I think confidence that your data is reliable, confidence that your workflows can adapt, and really confidence that you're in the right system, that this is your core system to run your entire business. With AI coming out, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that the confidence that your data is well maintained and that your workflows are proper is a key part of this new release. So it's not really about dramatic transformation, as we said, but it is about confidence going into the new release and into the new year. Okay, well, with that, I think we'll close today's session on this NetSuite 2026.1 release. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, whether around this release preview testing, planning your upgrade, or exploring any of the areas that we discussed, our contact information is on the screen. And we really appreciate you for spending the time with us today. We look forward to connecting with you again soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye now.